Okay, Mishlei 17:5, and this pasuk is one of these pasukim that seems to be like have a wealth of possibilities and ideas. Okay, so if anything, we're gonna be like we're gonna have too many ideas. That's my hope. This is not one of those weeks where I fear that we're not gonna come up with anything. Okay, loig larash cheref osehu sameach laed lo yinakeh. Words are not the easiest words, but if anyone wants to try to translate, then go for it.
Someone who mocks a poor person,
Okay, a
uh,
poor person.
makes himself an embarrassment, maybe.
Okay, good guess. So cheref, cherpa can mean shame or embarrassment. Cheref can also mean like macharif umagadef. Like that's the context that we're talking about here. I don't know if that helps.
Um,
I'll show you the BDB. Actually, I don't know
yeah,
if the BDB is going to help here. Okay, so we had here just by the way, before I delete this, you have loig is to mock or deride. Rosh is to is or is a poor person, okay, or to be a person who's lacking. Cherif, so it says reproach. Let's see if it has the okay, yeah, none of these are good. So insults is probably the best. Actually, I'll show you the example. Maybe this is another familiar example that we did we quote this in this year? Let's see. In Kiddush Hashem, I think Rambam uses that when he's talking about the highest level of Kiddush Hashem. No, actually, I don't think he does. Wait. No, hold on. Let me just look at Talmud Torah. Oh yeah, here we go. Yeah, this is a good example. So he's talking about the conduct of Talmidei Chachamim. There's in Hilchos Talmud Torah 7:13. So he says the Talmidei Chachamim v'chein hayader chasidim harishonim. This is how the early pious sages this is their way. Shomin cherpasan, they would hear people insulting them ve'inan meshivin and not retort. V'lo'od ela shemochlin lemacharif v'solchin lo. Rather, they would forgive or they would pardon the insulter and forgive the insulter and pardon him. Okay, then another example later on. That's when they scorned him or insulted him in private. Okay, so I think insult is probably the best thing. So insults osehu. How do you translate that?
his maker.
Yeah, his maker. Okay, with a capital M. Okay, because I think everyone says that that's talking about God. Sameach la'id lo yinakeh.
Okay, it's someone who rejoices in destruction.
Yeah, one who rejoices in. Yeah, so destruction is interesting. I think I agree with the BDB here. Distress, calamity, I would say misfortune is what I'm inclined to translate it as. And then lo yinakeh.
Um, will not. I see here it says clean, but like will not be forgiven or like.
Yeah, it does have that implication here. So I think will not be. So I know Art Scroll is a big. I don't know what Art Scroll says here. I know Art Scroll is a fan of vindicated, or will not go unpunished. Maybe is probably the more normal way of saying it. All right, let's look at our minimalist translations here. So we got Mitzus ציון, who says La'ed is inyan takala umikre ra. So he says aid equals yeah, I guess mishap and bad incident, bad occurrence. Okay, so I think misfortune is probably good for that. Targum says, oh, I'm going to delete this. Targum says, Demaste lemiskana marges labariye, udachade latavra dechabre lomisdake. So I did the little ChatGPT Aramaic to Hebrew to English thing here. So Demaste is just a translation of mocking. Lemiskana is a poor person. Marges is the one thing that he says differently. Angers his creator. Okay, so you could say, yeah. So I think that's going to be the chiddush here. And then I think the rest is just literal. Udechade latavra, one who rejoices at. Oh, that's actually close to what you said at destruction. Okay. Lo, where did it go? lo mizdake, will not be acquitted, or will not be yeah, acquitted is also a good translation. Will not be vindicated, acquitted, unpunished. Yeah, that's probably the best way to put it. Okay, fine. All right, so let's delete this just so we can move it out of the way. That did not work. Okay. Art scroll. One who mocks a pauper insults his maker. One who rejoices in another's misfortune will not be exonerated. Okay, exonerated is fine. I'll add that to the list here. Exonerated. Oh, sorry, exonerated. All right, Corin, we didn't have a Rav Hirsch, oddly enough. Corin says, one who mocks the poor insults his maker, and one who is glad at calamity shall not go unpunished. So that's pretty much what we said. Alter says, he who mocks the poor, or sorry, who mocks the poor insults his maker, who rejoices in ruin will not go scot-free. Scot-free is a little non-biblical in its feel. But then in his footnote, he says, on the basis of the phrase used here, sameach la'ed, modern Hebrew has appropriately adopted simcha la'ed as its term for schadenfreude. Okay, so that's another good modern word here. Okay, so let me copy and paste this into the chat and move these up upstairs. Let me do it like this. Okay, so move this here and then put this into the chat so you can have access to it. And then I'm gonna also move this up. Okay, so what are the questions? Yeah. First question.
Why do we have to say the first part of this? Why did we have to say that on? It seems so obvious that
Okay.
mocking
That's
is a terrible thing to do, and God.
okay.
It's
The first half
need elaboration.
seems obvious.
Yes.
Obviously, mocking a poor person is a bad thing to do.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. So that's what we call the oral question. Yeah. Isaiah.
Well, isn't the creator not so easily insulted? Meaning
Yeah.
can't insulted? What does it
Okay.
mean?
So what does it mean to insult God? Right. And I'm going to put in parentheses. Obviously, it doesn't mean his feelings are hurt, since God has no feelings. Okay. But what does it mean? Yeah, Rifki.
Yeah, I was also gonna go the God route, like similar to Isaiah, like why even bring him in? Like I know
Yeah.
we have him in other ones, but it's not the most common. And then
Yeah.
also like on that, like are we also saying that he's involved in the second half of the pasuk?
Okay. Good questions. So let's say why frame the I guess the badness of mocking the poor in terms of God, right? And then what I guess how would we say this? How would we put this objectively? I don't want to say what role does God play in the second half because that's presupposing that he does. I guess actually I'm gonna combine this. Why only I guess yeah, I'll put it in a new question. What is implied by the fact that Hashem is only mentioned in the first half, but not the second, right? In other words, is he does he play no role in the second? Or I guess in rejoicing at misfortune? Or is he implied? Is I guess like is he implied somehow? Yeah. Okay, Alex.
My main question is, are these three categories related? And if so, why are they ordered in this way? Like, is there an intuitive reason, like insulting God would come after mocking a poor person categorically?
Yeah. So I'm gonna actually put that as the crystallization of this question, which is what is the relationship between these three acts, right? Of mocking the poor, insulting God, and rejoicing at misfortune. Yeah, Isaiah.
Who's doing the lower hand? who's doing or not doing the vindicating, acquitting, unpunishing, exonerating? Like,
Okay.
and kind of, I assumed it was God, like in the.
Okay.
maybe-
Yeah. Right. That's yeah. I'm gonna actually insert this into the previous question, and then I'll make yours a separate question. For example, is Hashem the one who doesn't vindicate him? Okay, so then the next question is, well, actually, let's ask this in our normal way. I think that's just a clear way to say it. What is the hava amina? Okay, i.e., the false assumption being addressed by the second half. Okay. In other words, why would we think he'd escape punishment, right? I guess, yeah, he'd be vindicated, acquitted, unpunished, exonerated, and who is, I guess, and why is that wrong? And then who is, maybe these are two separate questions. Who is doing the punishing, or non-vindication, etc.? Yeah, Racheli?
So I was gonna ask, like, I feel like it's a weird cause and effect. Like, one who rejoices in misfortune will not be unpunished. Why doesn't it just say they will be
Yeah.
punished?
Okay, good. Why say the consequence in the second half in the negative, right? Why not just say will be punished, or what's the opposite of acquitted? Sentenced, I guess, right? Sentenced or indicted. I don't know what the proper terms are here. Yeah. Okay, Rivki?
Yeah, so two questions. One, which you might include in question one, but like, what is it about mocking the poor that insults his maker?
Right. That is a major question here. Okay, so what is it about mocking the poor that that insults his maker?
And then my second question was, I think just kind of like, it says what they're doing, but I guess like what's the context, or like what are we supposed to take from this?
Yeah, so what is let me push you a little bit more to ask so we know the practical application, which is don't mock poor people and don't rejoice at misfortune, right? So what is your question?
I guess my question is, it's more than just it seems obvious. Hold on, I have to think about it.
Sure. Yeah, I think that you could go a couple routes there, so that's why I don't want to put words into your mouth here. Okay, I'm gonna go to Racheli first. Yeah, Racheli?
Also, I feel like the language is ambiguous, like whose misfortune it's talking about. Because
Yeah, okay, that's a good question.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, okay, so let's actually ask this for both things, which is, let's say, what is included in, I know you're asking about the second half, but I'm just gonna include this in both. What is included in mocking in this context? And then we might as well also say who is included in the poor in this context. And then similarly for the second half, what is meant, I guess, like what are the parameters of rejoicing at misfortune? Okay, whose misfortune? What is considered rejoicing? These could be split into separate questions, but I'm just doing it as one. Rejoicing. Yeah, but let's say like with the rejoicing thing, like this week's Parsha, Sarah laughs, but she laughs internally. She doesn't laugh externally, and she's called out on it, so like, are we talking about just like an internal, like gleeful reaction, or are we talking about like laughing out loud, or like pointing your finger? In the chat, Racheli says, I know something earlier translated as similar to Schadenfreude, but it doesn't specifically say, oh, sorry, someone earlier translated as Schadenfreude, but it doesn't explicitly say rejoicing in someone else's And someone else's. Yeah, that's true. It doesn't say someone else's. I think the plain shot is it's someone else's misfortune, not in your own misfortune. But yeah, it doesn't say. Yeah, Ariel?
Yeah. What is the pasuk adding? I may have asked this question, but what is the pasuk adding by saying insults his maker? Like, what is it teaching us?
Yeah, so I included that in why frame the badness of mocking the poor in terms of God, right? I'll add to that. There are plenty of bad, of bad, quality. I guess plenty. There are plenty bad things. That doesn't feel good. Doesn't feel right to say. There are lots of bad things about mocking the poor. Aside from this. Yeah. Isaiah?
Yeah. Does the poor person, is he aware of your mocking
Oh,
in
that's a
this
good question
case?
also, right.
And also
So
the misfortune, the person who has misfortune also.
yeah, does he have to be aware of this mocking? Do others, right? So in other words, is this like you're mocking him and his feelings are being hurt by it, or you're mocking him and someone else is seeing it, or is it just in your head, or is it just to yourself? And then similarly with the misfortune, what is considered rejoicing? Does the person know about it? Are you expressing it? Is it purely internal? Okay, next is my dad.
It tells us what not to do, but it doesn't tell us what to do.
Oh, that's a good question also. Right. Okay, so what is the opposite of the entire pasuk? I.e., this is just the bad decision. But what is the opposite good decision? Right. And it's not just you could just say it's don't mock and don't rejoice, but maybe it's more than that. Yeah, Arya?
Yeah. What if this individual, I mean, will we say the same thing if the guy mocked the rich person?
Okay, good. So what about mocking other people, right? I'm gonna put this question over here, which is like, why limit this to mocking the poor? Okay, isn't all mockery bad? What about mocking the rich? Yeah. Okay, I feel like there is at least one more major question that
What's the practical takeaway?
So the practical, that's similar to the one that Rifki asked, and I still feel like, to me, that's obvious. Don't mock poor people and don't rejoice in misfortune. So unless you guys can formulate a sharper question, then I think we have the practical.
What's the subject of the pasuk?
Okay, so that qualifies. Okay, so what is the subject of the pasuk? But let me be more clear than that of the pasuk. Actually, anyone else want to be clearer than that? Like what is that question really getting at here? Like there's our knee-jerk reaction question where we just ask that about every pasuk, but then I think here there's a need to ask that something,
Right.
Yeah.
I guess like is it about like mocking in general, or is it about specifically to the poor people? Like
Okay.
what's
So the way I would say it is like this, is what is the relationship between the two halves, right? What's the unified theme? Yeah. Which is really what the question about what's the subject always getting at. But here it's like you could conceive of a pasuk about mockery, and you could conceive of a pasuk about rejoicing in misfortune. Okay, are those all the questions?
Did we ask about audience?
No, we did not. Who is the intended audience of this pasuk? And I'm going to go ahead and just ask here, is there a relationship between this pasuk and the surrounding pasukim? Okay, so let's just refresh our memory about the surrounding pasukim here. So we have better a dry piece of bread with tranquility in it than a house filled with meat of strife. An intelligent servant will rule over a shameful son and will split the inheritance among brothers. A crucible for silver and a melting pot for gold. And Hashem tests hearts. an evildoer listens attentively to lips of iniquity, and a man of falsehood inclines his ear to speech of, I mispronounced this word last week, havos, of destruction. Okay, then we got our pasuk, and the next one is Ateres Zakeni b'nei banim v'tiferes banim avosam. Okay, the crown of elders is their grandchildren, and the splendor of children is their fathers. I do not think that our pasuk connects to the next one. So if anything, it is connected to the previous ones, but maybe not. Okay, so if you're gonna go that way, that's the way you go. Yeah, Isaiah?
Forgot my question for the moment, so
Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and start importing the questions into the chat. And then we will have our thinking man. Yeah, Rifki?
Yeah, just interesting question that I don't know if I ever thought about. In Mishlei, like I know we say that Shlomo wrote Mishlei really to help, quote unquote, unlock the Torah for the people of the time. My question is, what about like non-Jews?
Yeah, well, that's actually an open story in the Chumash. I mean, in a way. Which non-Jew, famous non-Jew, do we know was attracted by Shlomo's Chochmah? Anyone know in Sefer Malachim?
Like Sheba or something?
Yeah, the Queen of Sheba, right? So, and that was, I forgot the exact language that it uses, but something like, she heard about the reputation of Shlomo's wisdom, and she went to him as well. So, I think that is that's the closest answer that I have to that question. Yeah, Isaiah?
yeah. So why would someone mock the poor or?
Okay,
or
that's a good question also. Yeah. Why would someone mock the poor or rejoice at misfortune? Okay, I'll add that to the last last part of the questions here. All right, whatever. Okay, so now we have our thinking minute. Okay, and like I said, I think the difficulty here is not going to be to get ideas. I think it's going to be to rein it in. I think the temptation will be that there are too many ideas or too many directions, and we have to like really be specific and clear. Maybe that's just how I'm feeling, but maybe people have different. All right, let's think. Okay, let us start with my dad.
Yeah, this was more a question that occurred to me. This is not making a distinction about how people got poor.
Correct, right. Unless, actually, sorry, I should say, who's included in the poor? I'll put that, I'll put that as a question. Does it matter how he got poor? And I'm saying that because, there's different words for poor in Mishlei. So there's ani, there's rosh, there is dal, there is evion. So I know that there are some meforshim who say, this refers to just anyone in a state of monetary lack. Another word refers to someone who's in a state of any lack. Another one is referring to someone who became poor. I always forget which one's which. Okay, so it's a good question. Yeah. Okay, Rifki?
Yeah, okay. So this was probably like my fastest idea ever. So I'm like a little nervous. I'm like, maybe it's not as good as I'm thinking about it now. But really like the first thing that came to my mind, like if we were to label the subject of the pasuk, would really be like about ego. Because I was thinking about Isaiah's like last question of like, why would a person even do this? And I really think that, at least the first thing that came to mind was a person really does this because you're forgetting like where your place in the world is. I feel like especially with those two things, like with mockery and with rejoicing in misfortune, like those are both, I think, like instead of having compassion, being like, wow, like if I was in that situation, then like I hope someone would help me or whatever it is. And I think that that's the piece that's missing, is that it's that compassion in both of those areas, which is why I think it's so connected to Hashem, right? And what really made me think of was the story in Mitzrayim, and like, why is Mitzrayim so central? Because of these really important concepts that if we don't check our egos, if we don't check ourselves, at all times, it's very easy to slip into a God complex and just like, oh, well, that would never happen to me, or like I would never be in that situation. So that's where my brain was going.
Okay. All right, that is definitely a good start. Okay, so what I find interesting about this idea is it's interesting that this is why Ariel's question, or Rabbi Moskowitz's question of what the subject is so important, because you look at this and you could just say, oh, this is about mockery or about bullying, let's say, right? Like I think the modern term for this is like bullying, mockery and rejoicing in someone's downfall. But Rifki's pointing out that you could say that this is about ego, and it's the egotistical people or egocentric people who are able to do this. And it might also be the cause of them doing it, right? Like making yourself feel superior to the poor person, or like relishing your own success, which you're reminded of when someone fails. So it's on one side ego, and then on the other side compassion. And maybe a better word for compassion here, I mean, compassion is a good word, but a better word for compassion here would be empathy, right? Of like seeing yourself in those person's shoes and recognizing that this could happen to you. And yeah, okay, so that's definitely a good approach. Okay, now I think what I'm going to do here, because I have a prediction that there are going to be a lot of ideas that overlap, I'm not going to do what we usually do of taking one person's idea and fully developing it before moving on. Let's just get everything out on the table, and then we'll start to see patterns and categories, and then we'll see where we go from there. Yeah, Ariel.
Okay,
Can
I
I
have
say
a
one
little.
more thing
Sorry.
really quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, just one last
Yeah.
thing. I just wanted to really like hone in on like the last half, because I think that's a really interesting half. Like, okay, like why do we care that he's not going to be, exonerated, whatever it is? And
Yeah.
I think it really speaks to that whole point of like saying the only being that could really do that is God. Again, just like really showing that person that like they're not the one that's going to even, let's say if they were in that situation, they wouldn't even be able to, exonerate themselves or whatever. It's only up.
Okay. Only Hashem has. Sorry. You can't escape Hashem's jurisdiction. By the way, Rifki, jurisdiction. Your audio started flickering in and out. I mean, I heard all the words, but in case there's something you need to do on your end, I just wanted to let you know so it doesn't frustrate you later. Yeah, Ariel.
Okay, my idea is it might be a little out there,
Okay, that's good.
but
That's the other thing I was kind of hoping for, because a lot of it is easy to give shoot from the hip ideas here. Not that that's what you were doing, Rifki, but like it is easy to So creative out of the box ideas are good also.
okay, I want to say that the first half of the puzzle, I think it's kind of sharing with you an insight into the person himself, into his like value system.
Okay.
And I think that's what it means. I think that's what insulting God means. I think it's kind of like he's kind of like he is a specific person that's anti a certain value system that's in this world, as a system. And I think when a person mocks someone who's poor, I think he's missing this true idea of how God operates this world. Because if he's putting down I don't know, if he's putting down someone who's poor, he clearly has a very messed up way of how the world works. He probably thinks, I'm not saying this is a part of the idea, but it's just an example. Like he probably thinks that, look, being materialistic is what's important. You know, I,
Yeah.
I would even argue I would even argue that a person who puts down a wealthy guy, like nowadays, you have all these socialists, all these people who are putting down the wealthy people. I would even say that's also against, you know, um, insulting God, because they also don't understand the value of, the system and how the world works. So now the question is, well, so then why is the pasuk specifically highlighting the poor person? Well, I think, you know, it's just easier to see this as a test case when, with poor people,
Yeah.
um, as opposed to someone who's wealthy. So it's just a simple answer. But so now the second half of the pasuk, I think that it's one thing to, okay, mock them. Fine, you don't have like a great idea of how the world works in God's system, But once you're rejoicing in someone's misfortune, it's almost like you have this positive quality of another value system that's in substitute of God, which is going to be very difficult to break out of, possibly even totally exonerate yourself from.
Okay, so that's stemming from another value system instead of God, and you won't be able to easily escape that value system. Okay. All right. So I see individual points that you're making. I do think that it needs to be tightened up here and unified. I do think there's still a little bit all over the place here. Let me just look at it again. I mean, I think the most fruitful thing in what you're saying is that the mockery stems from missing some idea about how God runs the world, and that rejoicing someone's misfortune also stems from a value system that is contrary to God. So then I think the question I would put to you is, what unifies the two halves precisely? Okay, I think that's the next question you need to answer. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Racheli.
Okay, I think mine is honestly pretty similar to both.
Okay.
But I think there's two things happening here with a person who mocks a poor person or rejoices in someone's misfortune. One is a lack of mercy, and the other is like unable to recognize hashgacha, like God's providence over what happens in the world. And so I think the lack of mercy and the denying hashgacha go together, because in both situations, the person is basically not able to realize that in an instant they too could be poor
Okay, good.
or have misfortune. And I think that this disregard for Hashem's hashgacha can lead them to act against certain Torah values, which would lead to punishment. And another concept is that kind of like Hashem like acts towards us how we act towards others. So if we don't have mercy for others, Hashem will not have mercy for us, like at a time of judgment.
Okay. Others with mercy, Hashem will not treat us with mercy. Okay. So far, this is the one that I've seen the most in the meforshim. Okay. So we'll go there momentarily. So nice thinking. Okay. Isaiah.
All right. So I think that the insult to God is something specific. The thing is that you're a person who was created with the Tzelem Elohim, and you have the capability to like act in a godly way in situations. When you see a poor person and you reject the possibility within yourself to help the person, and you instead mock him, so then you're taking that opportunity of like acting in a way that emulates God, and instead like laughing at it. So I think because this person is there, they're waiting to be helped, by a person who would recognize their down situation, and instead you are like laughing at that situation. And then when you actually see someone experience a misfortune, and I guess you don't have to see it, but like when you laugh at a misfortune that happens, that's like even worse in a certain way, because it's like you're taking pleasure in the like another person's like lack of their like they're losing their ability to express their Tzelem Elohim. I think ultimately, like even if it's monetarily, they're losing out, but like they're losing, something of what they need, and you're happy about that. Well, God's viewing that as you like basically saying, I don't care all about what you created the world for, and you can't be like you can't be vindicated for that, because you're saying like no to the whole purpose of what he created you for.
Okay. The purpose we were created for. Okay, good. I'm very curious to see when we go into the meforshim how your idea interplays with Racheli's idea and whether they're just two features of the same idea, or whether it leads to different ideas. Because I think the fact that Racheli put it more in terms of your lack of mercy and your relationship to God's hashgacha, Isaiah put it more in terms of what a human being is. So I'm not taking a stance either way. I'm just very curious to see how those two play out, because they're expressed in different terms, but I can see them being related. Okay, nice. All right, back to my dad.
This is almost a sarcastic, humorous comment, but to solve this problem is obvious. We just need communism. If you have communism, you have no more poor people.
Yeah, that's what they think, right? Yeah, but
Make people-
okay, right, but that's really talking just more about poverty, right? That's not really talking about the insulting, or are you taking a stance on the insulting or the rejoicing in misfortune?
Well, it would stop because there would be no more misfortune.
Right,
of-
right, yeah.
yeah.
Okay, Ariel.
Yeah, I think I have the unification hymn.
Okay, good.
I think the first half of the pasuk, and I think it just means that one who has like a distorted view of God, or like how the system is operated, it can lead to having a like a corrupt or distorted actions within yourself.
Okay. Sorry, that's for the first half, or that's for
It's
for both? Okay.
for both.
Okay, so
It's like if you have this will happen.
so if you have a distorted view of the system, sorry, say one more time. Oops, sorry.
Yeah, if you have a distorted view of the system and how the world works, or God, distorted view of God, you will it will affect your it will affect your it can corrupt you in and it'll express your, I mean, I just had it before. It'll corrupt you as a person, which will result in these actions or activity.
Okay, all right, so let's do this. Okay, so a lot of good ideas here. Let's now go into the meforshim. Okay, and again, we're gonna do a similar thing with the meforshim that we're doing right now, which is getting their idea and then seeing. A lot of these are going to sound similar, but I'm really interested this time in the differences. Okay, and as we do this, we'll try to see how many distinct approaches there are. Okay, we'll do more mefarshim than we usually do. We usually only get through two. Okay, but usually we don't go to the mefarshim this early. Okay, so Metzudas David. All right, Metzudas David says like this. And the first ones I did not translate, and then the other ones I translated with ChatGPT, and I'm gonna go translate later again. Okay. Ki balago kilu yomar, because when, oh sorry, this is insults his maker. Okay, ki balago, because when he mocks him, kilu yomar, it's as if he's saying shalachesron da'ato hen, that he became poor without God's knowledge. Velo ad Hashem Paul Kozos, and Hashem didn't do all this. I will translate the whole thing first. One who rejoices at misfortune. Hasamech al tkalas chavero, one who rejoices at the mishap of his friend. Lo yinakem min hatkala hahi, will not escape that same mishap. Ki tavu gamalav, for it will come. Will also befall him. Okay, so what is this saying? This is a little cryptic. Oh, actually, hold on a second. Yeah, this is a little cryptic here. Actually, you know what? Let me just look at one more thing. I just want to see really quickly. There was someone else who said, actually, no, yeah, we won't combine them yet. Okay, yeah, Alex.
I'm trying to understand how to like make of the first half of that. Is it to
Oh, sorry,
say
hold on a second. Pause. I might have mistranslated it.
oh, okay.
Dato heni. I don't know if this is without God's knowledge. Hold on a second. Yeah, sorry, I think this is wrong. Without due to his lack of knowledge. So in other words, when you mock the poor person, it's like you're automatically assuming that it was this guy's ignorance that got him poor, rather than assuming that Hashem did this. Okay. And yeah. All right, sorry. I say it again. I wasn't listening to you the first time. I just was realizing my mistakes.
I was confused with the first half of the translation. I think this clears up some things, but is it to say that you should take it as like everything happens for a reason, and when you mock a poor person, you're going against reason?
Okay, so yeah, this is the tripwire here. Okay, V'lo Hashem Pol Kozos. That does make it sound like you think that the ani brought this on himself, but really Hashem caused it, and it does sound like it's saying Hashem made him poor, right? Okay, but here's the thing: is in reality we know that first of all, it is possible that people can make themselves poor. People can make bad decisions or whatever, and is this positing an entire like not theology, like what's the word I'm looking for, like yeah, like a theological stance on how this guy became poor vis-a-vis God? Like that seems to be a very, very loaded assumption. So I think that's what's bothering you. Like, what does this exactly mean?
Yeah, I don't quite get it.
Okay, good. All right, yeah. So hold that thought. Okay, I have thoughts, and I think maybe my initial intuition is good. We might need to go into someone else here. I think we might need to go into the meiri. Yeah, but go ahead, Racheli.
I think I'm also getting a little confused by the translation. I thought that it was more like when he mocks him, it's as if he's saying that the person became poor without the mocker's knowledge that Hashem caused it.
I don't think that's what it means. I think this is the more plausible
Okay.
reading that he. Yeah. So here's what I'm gonna do. Okay, I'm gonna pair the Metzudas David with one of the Meiri's translations. Okay, and okay, I did this with ChatGPT, but again, I don't trust ChatGPT fully with the translations, so I'm gonna go ahead and translate as I go. Okay, so this might clarify things.
Okay.
This is a Torah lesson. So someone who mocks the poor indicates that his thoughts about him are shesichluso upsayusu hevyuhu lakach, that he believes that the poor person's foolishness or naivete brought about his poverty. Okay. He also is revealing his thought that his own success is due to his own intelligence and mind. And this will lead him to literally hisyash means to give up hope. Ulahashlich hakel achrei gavo, and to cast his God behind his back. Not sure what he means by that. This was what it means when it says that one who mocks the poor insults his maker. V'hu hamor b'Torah. This is what it says in the Torah. Let's just look this. I know these are famous pasukim, but let's just look this up here. Oh, actually, no. He quotes both pasukim. Actually, no. I'll look it up inside. Famous pasukim here. Dvarim. What did we just say? 8? Yeah, 8:17. I'm gonna make this here. Okay, I don't know how good this English translation is. So when Hashem brings you into the land, you should, I'll just say in English here, beware lest you forget Hashem your God in not keeping his commandments and in his ordinances and his statutes, which I command you this day. Lest when you've eaten it or full and have built goodly houses and lived therein, and when your herds and flocks multiply and your silver and gold is multiplied and all that you have is multiplied, that your heart becomes haughty. So that's v'ram levavecha, your heart will become haughty, v'shachachta es Hashem elakacha, and you forget Hashem your God, who brought you forth from the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage, who led you through the great and terrible wilderness with fiery serpents and scorpions and thirsty ground where there was no water, who brought you forth water out of the rock of flint, who fed you in the wilderness with man, which your fathers did not know, that he might humble you and that he might test you to do what is good in your heart. Okay, here's the line. Ve'amarta bilvavecha, lest you say in your heart, Kochi va'otim yadi asa li asachai lezeh. My might and the strength of my own hand made me this wealth. This charta, but you should remember, as Hashem Elokecha, you should remember Hashem your God. Ihu hanosin lecha koach la'asas chayil. He's the one who gives you the ability to make wealth. Laman hakim esbriso asher nishba lahu v'sachal k'yom hazeh. In order to uphold his covenant that he swore to your fathers this day. Okay, so that's what the guy is going to say. And then he says, v'chein, so too, hasamech la'ed, someone who rejoices at misfortune, yoresh eno misyare al atzmo, shivyuehu shum nezek, that he's not afraid for himself that any harm will befall him, sheyurad v'ishtomim alav, such that he should tremble about it, or they say reflect on it. Okay, I don't know exactly what it means here. L'chein lo yinak elav hasof. Therefore, he will not go unpunished. Okay, so I think the meiri is a little bit clearer. We'll have to see if we hold that the meiri is saying the same thing as the Metzudas David, but I want to summarize the meiri here. Okay, so summary of the meiri is like this: is one who mocks the poor reveals his assumption that this guy became poor due to his own faults, okay, primarily in intelligence, okay, and that Hashem played no role in his poverty, okay. Likewise, this reveals his premise that this reveals the mocker's premise that his own wealth is due to his own intelligence, okay, and Hashem played no role in his success, okay. So this is an insult to God because he's writing God out of the picture and taking all the credit, okay. So that's that first half. So too, if he rejoices at his fellow's downfall, it shows a lack of, I guess it betrays an erroneous belief that nothing like this can happen to him. All right. And as a result, something like this will happen to him. Okay, so what is the main idea here?
What goes around?
If you take any issue with any of my summaries, then let me know. What was that? I didn't see who said anything.
What goes around comes around?
Yeah, right. But the question is, what's the idea, right? I mean, that's an American proverb, right? But we need to understand it mishleically.
Okay.
And what goes around comes around does not involve God, right? So this idea does involve God. So we need to understand the role of that as well.
I mean, it sounds like the main idea. Yeah, sorry.
Sorry, just I want to make one more comment before I forget. So Racheli, I think this is what, to me, this is when the Metzudas David said, it's as if he's saying that he became poor due to his lack of knowledge, and Hashem didn't do all this. I think what he means by Hashem didn't do all this, he's not saying that God made this person poor, or sorry, responding to Alex also, not saying that God made this person poor for a reason and positing the whole thing here. What he's saying is that you cannot discount the role that God plays in people getting wealthy and getting poor, and you cannot, it's just as wrong to attribute all the poverty to this guy's decisions and his mind, and to attribute all your wealth to your decisions in your mind. Sorry, I might have cut into what you were going to say, Rifki.
I mean, yeah, that's basically, I was going to say, I think it sounds like he's really concentrating on like man's relationship to money within the realm of like God's hashgacha.
Right. Okay, yeah, that's true. Anyone want to say? And and what you're saying here is also taking a stance on the subject, right? So let's actually start with that, right? So the subject is how a person views wealth and poverty in relation to ascribing credit to themselves versus God. Okay. Right. That's, I know this is a very, very ineloquent way to say it. Yeah. Racheli?
Yeah, I think it's just saying like this reflects a broad disbelief in hashgacha at all. Like in general, if you view wealth and poverty this way, it will lead you, or it shows that you do not see hashgacha at all. And isn't that why he says like this leads him to despair and cast aside God because he doesn't have any like trust left?
Yeah, the reason why I made a face when I read that part is because it does not, this guy who's mocking the poor does not really sound like he's despairing, you know?
Maybe deep down, like
Maybe,
the
I don't know,
subconscious, I don't know.
like so that's why I was thinking that just give me 1 second here. See, the other way to understand it is if the mockery is happening openly, if he's like, because mocking, plain shot of mocking means verbalizing it, right? Like you don't usually call something, you don't say I was mocking you if I'm not saying anything or doing anything, you know? So it could be if I go and I mock a poor person, so what I'm doing is I'm betraying I'm revealing my own premise, my own flawed thinking that you became poor because of your own stupidity, and God has no role in your wealth. And you as a poor person are going to, that's going to have a bad effect on you as a poor person because it's going to reinforce your idea. I'm basically infecting you with my illness. I'm infecting you with this idea that God is not playing any role in this, and then you as a poor person are going to give up hope.
You're saying that he is leading the poor
The
person.
poor person, yeah. I think that's a smoother read of the
interesting.
meiri.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah. Let me actually add that into my summary here. One who mocks the poor reveals his assumption that this guy became poor due to his own fault, and Hashem played no role in his poverty. And upon hearing this, the poor person, okay, who is already in a downtrodden state, will be cast even further. Well, sorry, will be even more despondent when you infect him with this idea that his poverty, his finances aren't related to God. Okay. Yeah. So that complicates the meiri a little bit, but it does fit in with the words better of the meiri and with the pasuk, because you're mocking the poor guy, and you're insulting God because now the poor person what there's this idea of we say in Asher that it's talking about preachers, but like people, creatures in a state of need look to God for their sustenance, and this poor person was depending on God. But then when you mock him, it can make him feel like God has abandoned him, and then that's going to be an insult to God because now he won't be turning to God. And you're insulting God as well. Yeah, Isaiah?
I guess I feel like I think the meiri is pointing out I feel like we've taken into account the first half, but not so much the second half, which he does comment on and says that the person who rejoices at calamity shows that he feels no fear that misfortune on him as well.
Okay, right. So
I think there's a unified quality between the first and second half, and the person views himself as this person making these two mistakes views himself as not part of. I don't know exactly what it maybe it's ego or maybe it's above reality that Hashem is in. The person views himself as either not part of the laws of cause and effect in terms of finances, or he just views himself as the ultimate cause of all his good and bad and doesn't view the natural world as possible.
Yeah, okay. So let me try this out as a unifying theory for the two halves. The subject of this pasuk is the view that a person's material circumstances are not dependent, let's say, dependent on God's hashgacha, okay, but solely on their own efforts and mind, okay? Therefore, when he sees a poor person, when he sees a poor person, he mocks them, assuming that it's all their fault. And when he sees himself as rich, when he is wealthy, he takes all the credit. Okay. Likewise, when someone suffers a mishap, he views that as a result of the person's own, faults, and he thinks nothing like this can happen to him. Okay, now let's say the positive. Okay, in truth, material circumstances are due to God. Okay, and I'm going to say whether in hashgacha klalis, that's nature, or hashgacha pratis. Okay, and a person, and although a person's decisions do play a role in their success and failure, it's ultimately dependent on God's hashgacha. Okay, hashgacha. Therefore, when you see a poor person, you need, when you see a poor person, or you are rich, you need to recognize the many factors outside of human control that contribute to that state. Okay. Likewise, when someone suffers a mishap, you need to recognize that it's not it's not necessarily entirely within their control, and that the same thing might befall you. Yeah, Rivki?
Yeah, just a question on, I don't know why specifically in this reading I'm like not understanding the difference, and why even have the second half of the pasuk here, because to me it sounds like they're kind of very, very similar ideas.
Good question. I mean, first of all, you don't need to say there's a new idea in the second half, right? You could just say that if you just had the first half, you would think that this is all about wealth and poverty, and the second half shows you that it's also about misfortune. But then if you just had the second half, you would be missing out on the prime case that the Torah highlights for this idea, which is wealth, because I think that is a big area where people feel this way. So it could just be that the two of them together point to this the theme. Yeah, Racheli?
Well, also, doesn't the second half like highlight how it leads to punishment?
Right, that's also true. The first half doesn't state a consequence. That's the question we're forgetting, by the way. Question we forgot to ask here is not to be rude, but what's so bad about insulting God? Right? In a Mishleic way. Right? So that's what the second half is coming to say, right? Is that if you reinforce, like Isaiah was saying, like that the person does not really view themselves as in reality, they view themselves as above reality. I'm actually going to write that down so I don't forget it here. If you view yourself as not in reality, but above reality, or the cause of reality, then reality will remind you that you're not. Okay. So that's the idea. If you view yourself as above, there is such, there's another pasuk actually that expresses this even better. Nifgashu. I think it's Ashir Varash Nifgashu. Ose Shnehem Hashem or something like that. I forgot the exact lashon, but it has the word Nifgashu in it. Let's see. Yeah, Ashir Varash Nifgashu Ose Kulam Hashem. So the poor and the rich person and the poor person meet. Hashem makes both of them, and I think there's Rבינו Yona on that says something good. Rבינו Yona. says, yeah, lo higia ha'osher la'ashir b'kocho v'sichlo v'lo ha'oni la'ani b'shiflus yadav v'chesron sichlo. Yeah, very, very similar idea here. So wealth does not come to the wealthy person due to his ability and his intellect, nor does poverty come to the poor due to the lowliness of his hand and his lack of intelligence. Kishneim nifgashu, because both of them meet. Okay, shechazar hagalgal upagsham mikre ha'osher v'harash. Okay, so the cycle, the wheel turns, right, and the chance occurrences of wealth and poverty meet both of them. Al kain ein roishis halavis par ha'ashir min harash. Therefore, it's not proper for the wealthy person to brag and glorify himself in his over the poor person. Osei kulam Hashem. Hashem makes all of them. Al tita nafshecha b'nafshecha lemor ki achre she'osher v'reish mikra upekisha misibas hagalgal. Do not make a mistake and say that since wealth and poverty are a chance occurrence that comes from the rotation of the sphere, don't think from, in other words, there are natural cycles of wealth and poverty. That's a reality, but don't think that that means that Hashem does not decree wealth and poverty. That's not true. Hashem does all of them. All causes are in Hashem's hands, and he has the ability to withhold a cause or to bring about a cause. Okay, so in other words, there are such things as the laws of economics, or like natural cycles, or let's say, like, especially in the world of in an agrarian society, I mean, a lot of who becomes wealthy and poor is going to depend directly on the systems of nature that Hashem, through which Hashem runs the world. And there are good years and bad years, so there is such thing as natural cycles. And so not everything that happens to a person is a result of their intelligence or lack of intelligence, but don't go so far in the other direction and say that Hashem does not have the ability to intervene with hashgacha pratis, because that's also the case, So this pasuk was more about like, the reason why I brought this in is because I wanted to point out the idea of natural cycles, So this person thinks that he's above all natural cycles, and that he's the cause of his own wealth, and that the poor guy is the cause of his own poverty, But Hashem plays a role in everyone's wealth and poverty through hashgacha clause or hashgacha pratis, Yeah, Rivki?
Yeah, I just wanted to say something that reminded me of Eov in this idea. I think it's the Rav. I'm just making sure you can hear me, that my Wi-Fi is normal.
I can hear you, yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah, I think it's the Rav that says like one of like Eov's biggest downfalls and like part of why like he potentially could have been getting all the punishments he did was because he didn't have enough empathy for like the poor in his community.
Yeah. Yep. That is a theory. Yep. Okay. So speaking of that, okay, let's segue. I mean, again, we did not. So I'm comfortable saying, by the way, that the Metzudas David is essentially summarizing the Meiri's answer, but just in Metzudas David linked commentary. I don't think this is. I mean, you could read other ideas into the Metzudas David, but I think his formulation is consistent with consistent with the Meiri. Okay, it's almost even the same words. Okay, but now let's move to one that is closer to what Rivki just said. Okay, which is, I forgot what order this is in. Oh, hold on just a second here. Yeah, the Rביnu Yona says something similar. He says, "Hello, the Rosh Mari Bidvar." I'll just type it out here. Okay, one who mocks and degrades the poor. Mari Bidvarav shows through his words, ki machshavto, that his thought, there's belief really, is that ani v'haresh, that poverty and what's the other fancy word for poverty? Destitution come from chesron das adam, a lack of intelligence, the kotzer charususo, or deficient or insufficient hard work. Okay, v'chi ha'osher yimsalo b'kocho u'v'otzim yado, and that wealth comes through ability and the strength of one's hand. Al kain cher v'zehu. Therefore, he insults his maker. Samech le'ed, one who rejoices over misfortune. Ba kasuv hazeh, this pasuk comes lishkol hamidos ha'eleh, to equate these two traits. Behem loig l'rash, namely mocking the poor, v'samech la'ed, and rejoicing at misfortune. Lodia, and to teach us ki kasha haloig l'rash min hasamech la'ed, that mocking the poor is worse than rejoicing at misfortune. Ki haloig l'rash cher husehu kasha parasha. Ah, that's interesting, because one who mocks the poor insults his maker, as we have said. But tam samech la'ed, and the meaning of the second half is anoshi anesh al zadon libo, that he will surely be punished for the wantonness of his heart, of a locher oseu, but he does not insult his maker. Okay, so this is a slight variant, right? So let me just summarize here. Okay, so summary is the first half is the same as the meiri and metzudos, but according to Rבינו Yona, according to him, rejoicing at misfortune partakes of this midah, but is not as bad in that it doesn't insult God. So the question is, why not? Or how so? Right? Yeah, so that's different. Meiri does not differentiate between the two. So how is mocking the poor a greater insult to God than rejoicing in one's misfortune? Because we just set it up the other way, right? We set it up to say that no, there are, there's really three factors that contribute to every circumstance. There's your own decisions, with your abilities, and then there's hashgacha klalis and there's hashgacha pratis. So that seems to be true for wealth and poverty, just as it is for misfortune. Yeah, Racheli?
Okay, this is like half cooked.
Okay.
But I feel like verbally saying something reveals more than like an initial thought, and usually like rejoicing in someone else's downfall might just be like a quick like internal reaction, like before you can even really think about it.
I would agree. So I'm gonna say I'm gonna say number one, verbalizing tends to be a more crystallized form of thought. Two is if the person hears it, it affects them. I'm just borrowing from the meiri earlier. Affects them and as well as bystanders, and can distort their ideas of God. And three, I'm going to just say it's a high level to be able to not even have false internal reactions. Okay, so something to work on, but not something worthy of the strongest condemnation. Okay, so yeah, so in other words, so I think what's the main idea? I'm going to say it like this: the main idea is that you should work on it because it's like an earlier symptom of the full-blown mockery. Okay, so like, if you start to sense yourself like, oh yeah, okay, I was very shocked this one time that I overheard a kid, maybe like 5 or 6, like making fun of the way that like a homeless person like smelled, and the parent kind of like laughed along with it, with the kid, and I was thinking to myself, like, that is a red flag. Like the kid is going to be looking to the parent for how we relate to the poor, and if the parent is like modeling empathy and compassion and like the fact that this could be us or what, then the kid will grow up that way. you know. But if the kid is like mocking, oh, like this guy smells like urine, you know, and the parent is like encouraging it. First of all, I bet it came from the parent. Like kids don't, I don't think, pick this up on their own, you know, but that could lead to a full-blown you know, like mocking the poor, you know. Or I have this very distinct memory. I mean, look, I went to a public school in Eastern Washington, in a place where there were a lot of like, you know, Mexican immigrants. And I remember my mom telling me this. I never saw this, but my mom told me that when she was doing substitute teaching, like there were kids who were so like not fresh off the boat, because there were no boats to get from Mexico to Washington State, but like fresh off of however they got there, that there were kids who like had never seen a toilet before, you know? And so what they would do is, I think one of the ways that the kids would get, I guess there was no free lunch there, but I guess one of the things you could do is like, you could, there were certain kids who would get free lunches by like helping serve the lunches, you know? And I remember like just, you know, I was in second grade. I remember in second grade, I was next in line next to someone. I remember his name. I'm not going to say it. And this kid in my class was mocking the kids who were like getting, like, who needed to like work to get their lunch or whatever, you know? And like, so the reason why I'm bringing that in, I mean, that's a case of actual mockery, but like these, I think it is very easy to treat your feelings as though they are completely internal. And like, as long as you're not doing an avera or saying it out loud to anyone else, then like, there's no point in like getting rid of it. But no, this pasuk is telling you these midos are linked, and one of these will fester and what's the ugly word for blossom? If you're talking about like a, you know, like erupt into a you know, this full form of this thing. Okay. Comment in the chat from Rivka. Also in the first half, it talks about God becoming angry, and the second half talks about not being cleansed of this immoral laughing. Whereas in the 13 meters of rock, Hashem's patience and cleansing of sin is brought. Okay, good call. You better call, more relevant than you'll think. So it's like reversing these mitos from being real and empathetic through mita connected mita for the mocker. So no patience and leaves a stain on his character. Okay, good. That's a good segue to the next interpretation. Anyone want to have any more comments on this? See what I mean? This, by the way, unlike other Monday Night Mishlei shiurim, here it's like all these ideas are kind of like clustered around each other, and they like flow into each other. Okay, so now let's go to the next one, which is Rivka's bringing up the halachta bidrachav of emulating God's compassion. Okay, so let me go to that one next. Who is this? This is here we go. Emmanuel Haromי. This is one of our new friends. Okay, he says, Amar ki ha'ish shehu loeg min ha'ish harash. So it says that the guy who mocks a poor person, kivyachol hu loeg min habore. It's as if, as it were, he's mocking God. So it's interesting. He puts the word mocking onto the second half. Sorry, not the second half. The second quarter. Okay, he's not saying one who mocks the poor insults God. He's saying one who mocks the poor is mocking God. You saw that sha'asa'o. Oh, sorry. Hold on. Is this the one I wanted? Hold on. Maybe this is not the one I wanted. Huh. Okay, maybe it is. Maybe I was okay. Well, let's do it. Yeah. Lo minabori asal rash. So he's mocking the creator who made him poor. O shetziva shalolilog mimeno v'shi anikehu mi birchosav. That's what it is. Or who commanded us not to mock him and to grant him blessings, the poor person, from his blessings, capital H. V'zeh shehu loig min harash v'smech be'edo. Oh, so he learns it's the same case. Someone who mocks the poor and rejoices at his misfortune, the poor person's misfortune. V'chein kol ish yismach bir'oso aid v'shever al zulaso lo yinakesh lo yivoehu aid. So anyone who mocks another's misfortune will not go unpunished, because his misfortune will come to him as well. So I'm really trying to pull out one idea here, that why is he mocking God? Because God commanded him not to mock the poor, but God also commanded us to give the guy from his blessings. Okay, so I want to say here the idea that Rivka is saying, okay, which is, this is the main idea, and Rivka's, I always forget if it's with, sorry, you spell with a V or an F, you don't have to answer that. And Galina's idea, okay, is, so in other words, it's like this, is not only, so what attracted me about this interpretation is Mitzudas David, Me'irin, and Rבינו Yona all put the emphasis on the internal distortion of the guy who's doing the mocking. Emmanuel Haromי brings out an external manifestation of what the good decision is that you're precluding yourself from. So not only are you flawed in your thinking, okay, like the other meforshim, okay, but by breaking identification with the poor person and with Hashem's values, you're closing yourself off from emulating Hashem's mercy by providing the poor person with his needs. Okay, in other words, like this isn't just bad in a person's midos or mind, but also in their actions. Okay, so that's bringing out a new dimension there. Okay, who else do I want to do here? Let's do the Rav Sheshes. Okay, so this is another one that's a slight sidestep. Okay, Lo L'Rash Od Yomar Ki Yesh Os Echad Misyached Lo Nimsa Rak LaNashim Shem B'Tachlis HaChisaron. Okay, so he says, he goes all out on this. He says there's a certain distinctive sign that is only found in the most degraded base people. Alav Osze Be'emes Lo Nimalet Miyoso Chaser Gamor. Someone who has this sign it does not escape from the category of people who are total degenerates. Humishu Mavaze es Habrios. This is people who mock others, human beings. And do not treat them respectfully. V'yomer Log L'Rash, it says one who mocks the poor, Lefishi Habizayon Matsui LaNashim Hadalim, is because degrading or scorn is more common among poor people, like in terms of as victims. Amar Kimishu Malik Banashim Hadalim Ve'eno Nohe Kavod Osehu Klomar Shach Harash Yirme Be'enav She'eno Yachal Lahavio Lidei Midazo. So this is an interesting thing. Okay, he's saying that if you mock a poor person, then you're not honoring God because you're imagining that God is not able to bring this person out of this state. That's why it says he insults his maker because he's denying God's ability. And someone who has this midah and does not respect people, in truth, is at the utmost level of degradation. Okay, I'll read one more and then we'll summarize here. I don't think he's going to add a new idea here. Amar Kimishu Malik Banashim. Oh, sorry, I just read that. Samech le'elo inake ze gamken inyan acher more ahayoso bal midos raos. This also indicates that a person has bad midos. Husmech b'chol es ashiri shiavu puranus mikra ra livnei adam. This is a person who rejoices whenever he sees something bad happen to someone. Asher lo hera lo, who didn't harm him. V'ze hanyan yora al hayos ha'ish hazeh al tchuna ra. This indicates that the guy has a bad character. Hine hanyanim he'ele asher him osos v'simanim morim al tchunas nefesh ish tchunas ish pashut ubal midos raos. These signs point to a guy who's like a base guy with bad midos. Kinyanim elu enam midos kiim mikrim habayim mina midos, because these matters are not midos, but they are chance occurrences that come from midos. Vehim osos uskulos misiachados banashim chasarim patalis safek. Okay, I actually just want to focus on this first part here. Okay, so summary is like this. Okay. One of the biggest red flags of degeneracy is mocking people and not respecting them. Okay, someone who mocks another human for being in a low state insults God because he implies that God cannot change this person's state. Okay, so that's an interesting idea. Okay, and I'll give you a mushel of this. Okay, everyone knows that if you like mock somebody for a certain failure, and then a second later, then they achieve a wild success, then you end up looking like an idiot, right? So like if you're if you mock, let's say, I don't know, say someone, I don't know, shoots a basket and misses, and you mock them, and then they just make okay, I don't know basketball. I know you don't call it a hole in one. That's golf. But the
A
a free
swish.
throw, swish, yeah, right? Net air. Whatever the sport ball term is.
Nothing but net.
Nothing but net, right? Okay. So then you look like an idiot if you are mocking this person and then they just like pull off this like amazing feat repeatedly, right? So if you take that reasoning and you extend it, it sounds like he's saying, like, if you mock a poor person, that mockery is predicated on the fact that this is a permanent state. Or here's another example, by the way. If you have someone who is like very unsuccessful and you mock them, and then a year later you realize that they're like the CEO and that they're making a lot of money, you feel like an idiot, So there is some relationship between like mocking someone for a certain state that they're in and an unstated premise that this is a permanent state that cannot change, So what's the main idea then? So it's a quality I never thought of with mocking before. Half court shot, yeah. Yeah, I just want to write this thing here is that example is if you mock someone for a certain low state, and then fast forward and they've achieved great success, then you look like an idiot. This reveals that there's some relationship between mocking and an unstated belief that the low state is permanent. Okay, and then Rav Sheshes is saying that this also betrays a lack of belief in God to change this person's state. Yeah. So the question is, what's the main idea here? It's an interesting chain of reasoning.
Can you just explain how it's different than, I think it was the meiri? Like, I feel like it to me, it sounds similar to the hashgacha idea.
Yeah, so that's the thing, is that the meiri is referencing the fact that God is the cause of all causes, and everything about a person's state comes from God. But the Rosh Hashanah is talking about, if you mock this poor person, it's like you're saying God can't change this person's state, So example, people mocked David Melech, for just being some random shepherd boy, and he becomes king. People mock the Jews for being downtrodden and slaves, and then they become, God frees them and they become great. People mock Haman, I don't know, also look down on the Jews, and then Vanavochu, so Rosh Hashanah Meiri is focusing on just causes of states in general. Rosh Hashanah is saying if you mock someone, you're insulting God, not because you're discounting God's role in making the person who they are, or bringing the person to that state, but you're mocking God because you're implying that the person's state cannot be changed by God. It's a different emphasis, So I want to give a simplistic approach and then a more nuanced approach, okay? The simplistic approach is that God really can change this person's state as a result of their zechus, okay, their merit, okay. So if you mock someone for being in a low state, as if they can't change, you're disregarding, the whole system of reward and punishment. Okay. I don't want to say simplistic. I'll just say simple approach. Okay. So that's a simple approach. All right. I think there's a more nuanced idea here, and this one is not dependent on reward and punishment or hashgacha pratis. Okay, the nuanced approach is that God gave each person a tzelem elokim and bechira. Okay, and those two combined can achieve great success from the lowest depths. Okay, so whenever you mock someone for being in a state of lowliness, you are disregarding the greatest gift that Hashem gave man, and that underestimation will lead to your shame and loss. If you disregard the Tzelem Elokim and think that a person cannot achieve greatness from being in how many rags to riches stories do you know? Like, how many stories where a person was handicapped and they achieved like this great, like a Helen Keller type story, and achieved great like feats, or someone who I was just watching episodes of Last Meals, and what's the guy who plays the Nazi in Glorious Bastards? Christoph Waltz, is that his name? Was gushing praises about Mary Shelley, saying, how could this 19-year-old girl, I didn't know she was that young when she wrote Frankenstein, how could this 19-year-old girl in the early 1800s have understood human nature so much as to write this like great work of fiction that was unlike anything before? Like it is anyone who mocks another human being for being in a state of perceived failure or lowness is just a total underestimation of the Tzelem Elokim. And as the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos says, it says, kol shlochas al kavod kono roilo shlo ba'al olam. Anyone who does not have compassion for the glory of God is better never to have been born. And the Rambam says, what is the glory of God referred to? It refers to your Tzelem Elokim. If you don't have a proper respect for the Tzelem Elokim, that's an insult to God, because the most glorious creation he has on earth is the Tzelem Elokim. So it's a real insult to God to say like, oh yeah, this person is just like a loser, So I think that's a more nuanced idea. Okay, I'll tell you what, this is a radical idea. There are so many more ideas here. We didn't even get into the Derech Nister, okay, into the esoteric approaches, but we are coming close to the end. So radical move, I may make this a two-parter, okay? I may want to come back to this next week and do a bunch of other approaches that we haven't done yet, okay? I have to decide, because I do like having each week a different idea, but like there are some really, really good ideas here. So like, for example, like just a sneak peek here, the Meiri says that someone, actually, I don't even want to give sneak peeks. Okay. We didn't, but let's just say that Derek Nister is very good. Okay. All right. So let's just do a review here. Okay. So we have our ideas, which are good, but overlapping. So we have Rivki's idea that mockery tends to stem from ego and a lack of compassion. If your ego was in its place and you recognize that you're a human being just like everyone else and you could be in this state, you would not mock to make yourself feel better, and you would also have compassion for the person. Okay. And if you follow that life of ego and lack of compassion, you're going to get consequences. Ariel had this idea that if you have a distorted idea of how the system works in all the ways that we've been saying, okay, whether it's like not recognizing hashgacha or not recognizing Tzelem Elokim, whatever it is, it will corrupt you and you'll do these behaviors. That's also another question we didn't ask, by the way, about what causes what, or what are we concerned about here for what. Okay, Racheli said that there is a lack of mercy and a lack of recognition of hashgacha, and that those two things paired together make a person not think about the fact that this could happen to them, and that could lead you to get those consequences, either because you're going to violate Torah and get punished, or you're just going to or you're not treating others with mercy, so Hashem will not treat you with mercy. Isaiah said that this person is essentially like viewing themselves as God, as above the circumstance, and I am oh, sorry, wrong idea. That's not Isaiah. Isaiah's idea was that you're degrading the Tzelem Elokim, that this person, whether they're poor or misfortune, unfortunate. Poverty is a permanent state. I don't want to say permanent the way Rav Sheshes was saying, but like a ongoing state of your Tzelem Elokim is incapacitated, because if you're not able to eat and take care of your basic needs, you can't use your mind. And then a mishap, when a person has a mishap, they're temporarily not able to use their Tzelem Elokim. So if you're rejoicing about that, you're an anti-God cheerleader. Let's put it that way. You're acting like an anti-God cheerleader because you're rejoicing about a fellow human's inability to achieve their design that their creator intended for them. Okay, so that's bad. That's bad news. Okay, so we had Combo Mitzus David and Meiri, who said that when you mock a poor person, you're revealing your idea, your premise that each person is the cause of their own wealth and poverty based on their good or bad qualities, and God's out of the picture. And when you do that, and then when you rejoice about misfortune, then you are also writing God out of the picture. And that's going to result in you getting shown, when reality puts you back in your place, then you'll see that you were wrong about that. What happens to your intelligence then? And Rבינו Yona started off with a similar idea, but he said mockery is even worse because you're verbalizing it, which is either a stronger form of the internal distortions, or it is affecting others, or and then the point of this is to show you that you need to nip these things in the bud. You have to, if you sense yourself rejoicing in people's downfall, you have to get rid of that meter before it erupts into something worse. And then Rav Sheshes said the idea that when you mock someone for their poverty, Emmanuel Haromי said when you mock someone, you're really breaking identification with them and turning yourself off. You're going to make it hard to have the empathetic reaction of actually providing them with God's blessings, of doing tzedakah. So that's also bad. And then Rav Sheshes said that if you mock someone, it's like you're saying that they can't change. And that's either a denial of reward and punishment and zechus, that God could change their state, or it's a denial of the way God created us, which is with the Tzelem Elokim. By the way, I think the second one is a better pshat because that refers to osehu. You're degrading the maker of the Tzelem Elokim. I think this is like close to Isaiah's idea, but emphasizing the fact that the person can't change. Okay, really good ideas. I'm gonna have to think about this. Maybe I'll take a vote about whether we continue with this next week or do a different idea, a different pasuk. Okay. All right, thanks for coming. Have a good night and talk to you later. Till next time.
Thank you.